I got into photography in my teens. I guess it was especially the technology of photography and cameras which appealed to me. Back in the analog days, it took a fair bit of skill to be able to get reliably good photos, at least well exposed ones. While never the most creative of photographers, I did take pride in being able to get technically good photos. I mostly shot black and white and developed my photos in the base darkroom in the Air Force. Later, I had all the gear and would set up a temporary darkroom in the bathroom of our apartment. In all those years, I had no interest in video or filming. Skip forward to the 2000s, the kids arrived, and due to time constraints, and I want to get rid of the somewhat dangerous chemicals, I sold all the darkroom gear and moved to digital photography. Mail time! Over time, I sort of lost the passion for photography, as a trip through digital point and shoot, then DSLR, and eventually phone cameras easily overtook the technical aspects, such that anyone can easily make well-exposed, sharp photos in any light these days. Aha! Look at that! A lovely piece of 1960s French engineering. It's got all these beautiful, swoopy aluminium die castings. I still shot an increasing number of photos at family events and holidays and also for work, and I kept up with all of the technical developments of cameras, but I was not so inspired. This looks like a perfect way to waste a lot of my time. Well, considering I only paid $80 for it, my first impression is very positive. It doesn't look like it's ever been carried or, hasn't done much work, because there's all of the corners in that where you expect it to get all the paint knocked off. Nope. Starting this channel 3 years ago has latched into that earlier passion for photography. Okay, its number plate's fallen off. It certainly all looks nice and clean, nothing too obviously beaten up about it. Things like the ASA counter, the beautiful logo, all of that stuff looks completely undamaged. All the chrome work looks good. Switch is smooth. Now this is a beautiful camera, a true luxury item in its day. The film counter. The most interesting thing about it is that somebody has made this adapter to fit the Russian lenses from the Kiev 16U. Now this adapter is loose at the moment, but the original C-mount is still visible in there. Whoever made this adapter seems to have done a pretty nice job of the machining. Not sure if I would have mounted something like this with just 2 screws, but hey, that's just me. Just whip that surface rust off the adapter. I love learning, and it turned out that the learning curve of video is really steep, really long, and includes unlimited side distractions like editing, audio, multicam, motion sliders, all that sort of thing. Around that same time, one of my Gen Z offspring discovered her interest in analog photography, so I taught her how to develop her own films. That led to a discussion last summer about Super 8. I wasn't interested, but I took a bit of a look at it. It was a deep dive over months, and I quickly came to the conclusion that Super 8 films are just about as expensive as 16mm these days, but way inferior quality. So whoever made this adapter knew what he was doing with the lathe and the milling machine, because it's really quite a nice job. I took a bit of a look at this to work out why this mount was loose. It was only mounted by those 2 screws, and the thread's been stripped here, so I can't use that. It'll just damage the camera further if I try and use it, so it's coming off. I've ordered a C-mount lens, some Pentax television lens, which covers 1-inch television sensors. That should be fine. Yes, my first impression is very positive. Very much a machine neglected and not a machine abused. Looking through the viewfinder here, you can see some sort of cement damage. At least that's what I'm guessing, over here on the left-hand side. That's about the only other defect I've identified so far. Unfortunately, when I got it, there was no battery with the camera, but that's not a big deal. I'll be able to make up one of these. I've read that this is just a standard M42 camera thread, so M42 by 3/4 pitch, so I can just turn up a adapter for that. I'm going to have to get 7.2 volts onto it and see if it works, but until I get a battery made. The camera's also got this DIN connector. It's a 3-pin DIN. The connector looks fine with no corrosion. Bayonet mount. Luckily, they're not difficult to come by. One of my mates actually had a spare one which he gave me. That's nice. More stylish would be the right angle one, like the battery pack uses. This is a BKL 20222 or something like that. I use a blind spot power junkie when I'm videoing. This thing's got like an external 1.2 volt tap, takes just a normal plug. So I'll just wire that plug through into the DIN connector and get things going. Let's see if this machine still works. All right. This Beaulieu camera is a bit unusual in that it's got a vertically reciprocating shutter. Most of them have rotating shutters. I was watching an interesting video from the cinematographer lab on checking the sync speed of a non-crystal sync camera like this one. Put a macro lens on my normal camera, looking at the shutter mechanism, and we'll see what it syncs at. This is with the frame rate set at 24p, and now repeating that again, but this time at 25p, which I expect is probably the setting because this is a European camera. Okay, even there it is drifting a bit. Okay, so that was with the frame rate selector set to 25. Now if I flick that over and try and dial in an exact 25, let's see if I can find something better. Okay, let's go slightly off one way. That's worse. And that looks pretty stable then. Cool. Very slightly off. Well, that looks about the best setting I can find. That's good to know. Thanks for posting that video, the cinematography lab. That was really helpful. Oh good, my lens showed up. These little C-mount lenses are very cute, very small. 12.5mm means it's a bit wider than standard on this camera. Probably about a 43mm, 35mm equivalent. Hey, how cool is this? My daughter found the matching 25mm lens in the classifieds and gave it to me for Christmas. This one's even smaller. I think this may only be designed for 2/3 inch sensors, but I tried it on the camera. It seems to cover it fine. It's a bit annoying that the whole front element rotates, so if I want to use a polarizer, that's going to be a bit annoying. The 25mm acts like a short telephoto, kind of a portrait lens. And this one, the front element doesn't rotate. That's nice. I don't have the battery, so I won't bother using the battery holder at the moment. Let me just remove that. This is a really beefy design. It's like a solid aluminium casting. The battery holder hand grip's detachable with just 2 screws, like one's a 3/8, one's a 1/4. So it takes the screw-in battery at the front. Underneath by the thumb, it's got the main on-off switch and provides power to the camera. Since I'll be powering the camera with an MPF battery, Santa generously brought me an MPF battery holder and some 15-inch rails, so I can mount this to the camera. Or more to the point, I can mount the camera to it. If I was using a heavier lens, like one of the big zoom lenses, I'd probably machine up an adapter to pick up both the foot and the support screw from the side. At the moment, I'm just going to be using just this one light lens. Given how much film costs, I don't see myself doing a lot of handheld shooting. I'll probably be taking the time to use a tripod, so I'll throw in an Arca Swiss plate. As far as I can tell, these days there are only 3 manufacturers of 16mm film. In America, Kodak, and luckily we've got 2 in Europe. Fomo in the Czech Republic and Orwo in Germany. You can get films in all four major types: color, positive or negative, black and white, positive or negative. Since I've only developed black and white in the past, I want to stick with a black and white film. Kodak XX is unfortunately extremely expensive here in Europe. Orwo in Germany is just returning from a bankruptcy or management buyout or something, and they currently don't have any of their 16mm black and white film stock. So that leaves me with Fomopan. The one trick with Fomopan is it's a positive film, like a slide film, so it's got a bit more complicated developing. It was nice of Santa to give me a couple of rolls of this Fomopan 100R reversal film. Film comes in a metal can. Inside the metal can is a light tight plastic bag. This is my first bit of test film. Now as you can see, it looks terrible, but what does it tell us? It tells us that the camera is working, doing normal exposures. That's good. The problem I have here is I tried to use an environmentally friendly bleaching system and developed the film in coffee. While Coffinol works really well, the bleaching system doesn't work with this film. Also, my temperature control of the different chemical baths wasn't ideal. So you can see here how the hydrogen peroxide and citric acid bleach, which I used, has basically blown the emulsion off its backing. If I understand it correctly, the reduction of the silver halide causes oxygen bubbles, and this Fomopan film's got like a hardened base and the oxygen can't get through the emulsion, so it delaminates. So there's all sorts of instructions how to thread this thing. Starting from the bottom, find that easier. Go around the bottom spool. Also find I have to pull this out a bit to get that in. Open the film gate. Says no more than 2mm gap there. By the loop former. I think it's called the loop former. Then around this way. This one seems to go in quite easily. Now normally that'll be on a spool, of course, but I'll just wind that up in there. The take-up spool's got a little slot in it. So I've got to sort of feed that other end into that slot. I find putting a bit of a fold on that seems to grab the slot better. There's a little latch here which you've got to pull out of the way to put that spool in. Not really sure what that's for. Right. Motion picture drive mechanisms are pretty cool. Basically you move from just constant motion through to an intermittent motion at the gate and then back to constant motion. So let's check that. Okay, I bit the bullet. Come on, FOMO. It's bad enough that these are bad chemicals, but you don't need to use polystyrene beads in the 21st century. It's not like this stuff's that fragile. How about you sort out your packaging, huh? Now, according to this, the kit's only good for a single 16mm film, so this would get super expensive. I contacted Orwo. Their standard black and white film, UN54, is currently not in stock, and according to them, they're going to have a next batch available in mid-January. So as soon as that comes out, since that's just a normal negative film, I'll switch to that, because I can develop that in Caffinol. So here's the kit. Developer, I believe it's a potassium permanganate based bleach, then a clearing agent, and a fixer. These two only get mixed immediately before use and then thrown out. Luckily the whole process is designed for room temperature, so I shouldn't get the reticulation that I had last time. It's interesting that they say you can drain the working solutions into a sewage system. Right, I think it's time that I loaded this camera for real. I was thinking of doing another clip test, like just loading the camera in the dark, where I'd probably not get the film onto the take-up reel properly, but just shoot another couple of feed and do another test. But I realize I know the camera works. It's the developing tank that I need to test next. See, that's just overexposed this leader here, but that's normal. Wait a minute, let's go perforation down. Right, that's that nicely in place. Next, open the gate. Make sure it's nice and loose in the gate. I need no more than 2 millimeters of gap there. Following the arrow. This would be super fiddly to do in the dark. Under the cable. Okay, that's now loaded, and I'll just blast a bit of film through to get to the unexposed stock. Now we're ready to go. So let's set this all up. You can't really focus this thing through the lens, it's just not accurate. Can't really see the difference, so it's just under a meter. I'll set that. So I guess what we've all been waiting for is this a good result from a 1964 camera, or does it kind of look terrible? Okay, that looks like crap. Two problems. One, I simply screwed up the focus of my scanning. It looks fine on the film, it's the scan that sucks. And the second is I've got quite a lot of solarization. That's probably a lack of agitation of the bleach bath. Now, having shot a film strip with about 4,000 photos on it, the next thing I need to do is digitize them. For this setup, I've got a dial indicator stand with one of my cameras attached to it, 50mm macro lens with an extender on it, so it goes to 1:1. Frame doesn't quite fill the entire format, but good enough to get started. And once I finish the film, I'll show you the film gate I made to just align the film. Let's look at the second clip after I fixed my scanning a little and focus properly. I mainly shot black and white, especially in the Air Force I had access to a darkroom. Otherwise, when I moved into an apartment, I set up with a darkroom in the bathroom. So it took me 2 evenings to finish scanning a whole roll of film manually, which is kind of a pain, but oh well. This is the way I made my film gate. It's made out of basically machinist Lego, 1, 2, 3 blocks. I used Joe blocks to space them apart 12mm and used an 8mm gauge block while I was setting it up. So that gives me my little film gate in there. I just used 4 Stanley knife blades to space things so that the film could run through without binding or jamming. And a second pair of blocks bolted on top. So that's my first baby steps at cinematography. Thanks a lot for watching.